All right, so my guest this week is a New York based poet, spoken word artist, motivational speaker, and author. She has penned two books, Growing Pains, and her latest book, The Awakening, both available on Amazon.com. Making her second voluntary appearance. I want to welcome to the podcast, friend of the podcast, Alyssa Michelle. Alyssa, welcome back. How have you been?
Thank you. I've been well, and I've been looking forward to having another interview with you.
Man, thank you so much for saying that because I know that you said that you were willing to come back before. So it's good to know that you weren't lying. So it's good to have you back. Yeah, I loved our conversation from before. So I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you as well. Now, if you did not hear our conversation previously, make sure that you go back. That was back in February, is when she and I spoke last. February the 21st was the episode that she appeared on, and we went very in depth about her, who she is, her journey, and her book, Growing Pain. So make sure you go back and check that out. Again, it was a great conversation, one of my favorites. So a lot to talk about. Your new book, again, The Awakening. Congratulations on your new project. It's about 20 poems, if I'm not mistaken. I have it, by the way. I loved it.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. But you're welcome. Yes, 20 poems. It was recently released. I believe it was released in May. Is that right?
It was, yeah.
Now, you and I were just talking off air about how the book came about. So, if you don't mind, do you want to talk about that? How everything came to be? I actually was a little surprised and more intrigued when I heard more about the history. So, you were telling me that the project started with a writing challenge.
Absolutely, yeah. So I was on Instagram one day, and you know how when you like certain things on social media, your feed will like mirror what you like ads will come up and posts will come up that are similar to what you are interested in.
Yeah.
So this post had came up about a writing challenge. So I was like, I read it and I went to their page and then I went to the website and it had said that there was a writing challenge for 20 days. After the 20 days that you complete your poems, everyone's poems would get published. And so it was more of like, okay, this is another opportunity for me to not only get a book published again, but it was a challenge for me because I'm an Aries, so I love to be challenged because I feel like it pushes me to see what I'm capable of doing. And I've never written one poem every single day. Like that's never happened. So I kind of use this to strengthen my own skills as a writer and to see what I would come up with every single day. So yeah, that's how it started.
And I was telling you that, yeah, those challenges, those types of challenges, a poem every X amount of days is not good for me. Like I've tried that with National Poetry Month, and I, you know, usually after day 3, I am like, nah, I don't think I could do this. But I mean, obviously that's the point of the challenge because most people aren't able to do that, right? Like after a certain period of time, it's like I don't know what else to write about, or I don't feel like it, or I
Mhm.
just am not able to do it, and so it's to help push you through. But I guess I don't have uh, that mental fortitude to push through. So what's interesting about that, and I said earlier that it intrigued me after you told me that, was because one of the things that I wanted to touch on, or one of the questions that I did have, is were the poems in The Awakening newer poems, or were they poems that you had been wanting to include in a project like this? And when I say a project like this, when I read the book and I think about your your first book, The Awakening feels like a a level in your progression, like a level in your growth. Like, so with Growing Pains, it that book felt like you were in transition. It felt as though you were taking us on your journey, your maturation, your emotional and mental maturation journey, your growth, your manifestation, your evolution.
Hmm.
And it included so many different areas. And The Awakening is a book of, at least to me, if like confidence, like I've arrived, right? Like you have realized this goal of mental and emotional health. And while it's still part of your maturation, while it's still part of your evolution, you're wanting to get better. It just feels like this book, this project has a just a different space. Am I right about that?
Absolutely. So when I wrote it, it was just whatever was on my heart to write. So that was just the place that I was in and that I'm in right now. That, Growing Pains was just basically, to sum it up, a bunch of ancestral traumas that I was basically growing through, um, and basically healing from. And then the awakening just so happened to be like me being conscious of these lessons that I've learned, me being conscious of whatever was going on around me, and me being conscious of myself and, you know, my my divine path basically. It was just me waking up. So yeah.
And I don't know if both can be true. I know you were saying that you wanted to write what was on your heart, but was this the substance that you included in the book, was it intentional? Like, did you say to yourself, like, I want the pieces in this book to reflect this place where I am? Or was it more of, this is what's on my heart, whatever comes out, and this is what I'm going to include in it?
Yeah, it was not planned at all.
Mm,
I had no idea what I was going to write about. What I did was I set like a good hour aside every single night to write because I have kids. So I
yeah.
devoted that 1 hour to myself. And I sat and I was like, you know what, I'm not gonna force whatever it is I have to say. And what I did was I prayed, I asked God for guidance. I asked my spirit guides, I said, please guide me to whatever it is that you want me to write. So I would begin to like just write whatever was on my mind that day, like what happened that day, what emotions I had that day. Um, and then, I would fumble a little bit, and then after a couple minutes, I would get into a flow. So as soon as I got into that flow, I was like, you know what? This feels right. And it all just came together so great because I did not plan it. I did not even know what I was going to write about. Those 20 days, it just came together so perfectly.
And what I love about that is, as a consumer of your words, and maybe more importantly, a fan of yours personally, your mental and your emotional health, it did feel like I mentioned earlier, like you arrived, and to know that it wasn't. I mean, and even if it was, that's great too. But to know that this wasn't planned, this wasn't subject matters that you planned to write about and it naturally came out, that makes me feel good. But I imagine from a personal perspective, it allows you to feel good too, based on, again, growing pains and the book and then the journey that you took to get to this place.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
exactly what it is.
I do want to talk about your writing process. So, not necessarily the concepts and like the structure of how you write, but more like timing. And hopefully, as I ask this question, timing becomes more clear because it's not quite clear in my mind. Like, so hopefully, I articulate it the way that I want to articulate it. But so, for the more serious pieces that you write, just in general, including the ones in Growing Pains and in the Awakening, do you write to release whatever it is that you're feeling? Is it that, or is your writing more of a reflection? And I think I know the answer to this, especially with the Awakening. But is your writing more of a reflection of where you are? So, meaning, do you feel this way and say, okay, I want to write about it? Or is it I'm writing to get out whatever feelings that I have, and whatever comes out?
I will definitely say that it's both.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because I know in the past I've said I'm introverted, but that part of me is still there, even though I've learned how to be more outspoken.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like all of those emotions that have been bottled up, I feel like need to be released. It's very therapeutic to do it too, because when you don't feel like you have a safe place to really express yourself, for me, it helps to just write everything that I cannot talk about to people. So, when something happens, you call your friend up, and you're like telling them about what happened. I feel like it is so much better to use that energy, that same energy, in an artistic form, because you can not only heal yourself, but you can help heal other people. So I've just learned how to basically transmute that energy and say if I'm feeling like sad about an experience that I've had or a lesson that I learned because of an experience. It's like me basically talking to a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And like these words just flow through me like they're given to me. Like I just allow this energy to just flow through me. And so that aspect is like I have a message to carry to other people. So I'm like helping myself. I'm getting all of these emotions out. I'm basically learning what I got out of whatever I'm writing about. And
Exactly. Yeah.
then I'm using that message to help other people because there's so many other people who don't have this gift and who is
Mm-hmm.
not able to express themselves that way. But then that emotion that I put in my work, they feel it. So I'm like, you know what? This is not just for me. I'd be selfish if I kept this gift to myself because it was given to me to share with others, you know?
I do.
Mhm.
So, a couple questions based on that, then, based on what you were just saying. So, instead of, and I don't know if you were ever quite this way, and then it changed to using the energy for yourself, but were you a person at one point that looked to talk about or share whatever it was that was bothering you, calling up a friend and saying, hey, this is what's going on? And after getting advice, you said, you know what, maybe I should use this energy instead to focus on writing and expressing it this way? Or had it always been for you I can let my friends know, but I'm going to use this same energy and write it out so I can feel that feeling of release and looking to learn a lesson.
It was at first, I would get to a point where I would just say too much. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay
Yeah.
to like let
Yeah.
certain people know what's been going on,
Yeah.
but when you get to a point where you say too much to the point where like you feel like you've become a burden to other people,
Man.
or it could have just been something that you could have resolved in your head by talking it out with
Man.
yourself. So I was like, you know what? Now, not only do I have my own negative energy, I have the other person's negative energy because now I feel judged. Now I feel like, man, I probably shouldn't have said that. Or they're giving me advice that I don't really feel at the moment. So
That's
it's
it.
like I had to pull back and I had to be like, okay, listen, you're going through all of these things, you're feeling all of these things, you're noticing all of these things. Should you confront so and so? Should you really express yourself this way to this person? And a lot of the time I had to sit with myself and I was like, no, it's not necessary. Because if I'm understanding all of these things about myself, and if I'm feeling all of these emotions about what I'm going through, and if I can sit here and do this with myself, is it really necessary to bring other people into what I'm going
Right.
through?
Right.
Because that could really just mess up the lesson that I'm supposed to be learning by
Yes.
myself, right? So this is what I learned. I was like, you know what? It's okay to just say little things here and there, but certain things you really have to keep to yourself because those are lessons for you. Those are not necessarily things that need to be shared with other people. So I learned that. And so with that, I was like, you know what, this feels so good because I get to keep all of that energy to myself. I'm not giving it away. I'm not throwing it onto anybody. I'm keeping it. And I'm changing that energy into something positive to share with other people.
Yo, that is so true. That is so
Mhm.
true. And so now I'm almost at the point where it's like and I recognize that this may not be healthy all of the time, so I'm still trying to balance things out when it comes to this. But most times now, it's like, okay, well, I'll work to handle this on my own, and then I'll let everyone else know what I went through afterwards. So that way, if there are any questions that they have, I can answer those questions in a more confident and thorough way, and I don't have to hear the the advice or and I know that there are times when people would be coming from a place of care and concern, but it's like, yo, I don't need that type of energy right now, right? Like,
Right.
your way of doing things is not where I want. It's not where it's not the direction that I want to go in, and I don't need to go in because it's going to result in something like this happening. So yeah, for me it was like, okay, so I'm just gonna have to step back because, like you, I am more of an introverted person anyway. So me coming to a person and saying, "Hey, this is what's going on," and this is how I'm feeling was already, at least for me, uh, not natural. I had to put forth effort into doing that, and then to get a response like I would get from time to time, it was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm just gonna focus on resolving the issue myself if I'm able to, and from a creative perspective, write it out to get it out,
Right.
and then I can reflect on what I wrote, can step away from it, reflect on what I wrote, and then make my next steps based on how I genuinely feel. So, man, I really feel you on that because that is so true.
Yeah, I also feel like, as I'm not saying that you shouldn't talk to people because it's
Right.
like two sides. Like You can, but you have to make sure you know that those are the right people or that's the right type of support that you need at the
Mhm.
moment, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. And to your point, like I would feel like I was a burden on people. Like there will be times where I would say, I know they say they care, and I know they say they want to hear things that are happening with me, but they have their problems of their own, and they are going through things personally on their own. Is my problems, is my concern, or are the concerns that I have about this or that, will they care about it because they have their own concerns? So there was that feeling of like concern on their end. Like I was being concerned for them because I didn't want to burden them in what I felt like was a burden with my problems on them. So, but anyway, so yes, I totally feel you on that, and that is so
Right.
true. So I like that. I like that. And then I guess the second part or the second question that I have in relation to what you said is, when did you realize that there are people out there, and I guess maybe fully appreciate that there were people out there who don't have the gifts, don't have the talent, don't have the means to express themselves, and and can take solace in what you write, can relate to what you write, so much so where you wrote partially for that reason.
There had been times where I would share very very sensitive issues. Like, for instance, I had posted up a video on YouTube about being the child of an addict, and I was very transparent. I expressed myself as authentically as I could. Um, and this young woman had reached out to me, and she shared her story. And she was a complete stranger with me, and she just was like, you know what, you said everything that I would have never been able to put into words. So, I don't, a lot of people like to big themselves up and try to get like, this type of title of being a poet in the community and like connecting just for the purpose of being well known. And
Hmm.
that's okay. Like, you should be known as who you are. At the same time, I have a mission. My mission is not just to be Alyssa, the poetress who writes and who's an author. Like, that is my gift. But exactly what am I doing with that gift? Is it for an egotistical reason, for me to get attention, or is it for me to spread a message? And this is what makes me feel good because I feel like I'm helping someone. Because when a person comes to me who doesn't even know me and is able to share their story with me, and I'm just like blown away because they trust me so much because I was transparent with what I went through. And it's like that's where it's so much more than money to me. Like, that's priceless. It's so rewarding that I was able to help someone even though I can't change their problem. I helped
Hmm.
them. It's like, in some way, like, they feel me. Like, they don't have to be near me, they don't have to see me. It's like we're exchanging energy based off of what I was able to share. So that was one big one. And then another, when I do advertise my poems on like TikTok or Facebook, certain people do comments and was like, it resonated with them. Like, they feel like they can keep moving forward. There have been a few people from like the UK on Instagram who have reached out to me, and these are complete strangers, and they say like, you know what, I love what you're doing, keep doing it. They're like, I'm so inspired by your words. Like, these little things, they like, this is not money. This is more than money, and this is what keeps me pushing because I'm helping people. So it's so rewarding to me.
And how does it help you? Do you get encouragement from hearing other people's stories as well when you hear from your fans who, or people who have recently become fans of yours based on the information that you share, and then they turn around and share their stories? Is there, or maybe that's the question, are you encouraged by others and their stories and their willingness to share some of the things that they've experienced because of what you wrote or because of what they've heard you say?
Absolutely. I feel like sometimes, like when you have such a gift, a lot of people won't always connect with your gift. So when you finally find your soul tribe, as to say, these group of people who are on the same frequency as you, who have gone through like similar experiences, you don't feel alone. You feel like you're getting somewhere, and you feel like you're heard, because I feel like as a poet, as a writer, and as a spoken word artist, if I don't make someone feel, then I feel like I'm not doing my job. Like, it could feel a certain way when I'm getting it out, because it could just be for me therapeutic. But when someone else can feel all the emotions that I was feeling as I was writing it, I feel like I did my job, that I accomplished something. And then so I'm like, okay, well then I did do something good. Someone does hear the message that I'm trying to say. Someone does feel what I feel. So I feel like in all actuality, I'm bringing like a consciousness to not only myself, but like other people. Like I'm awakening not only myself, but other people, and I'm not alone, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I heard you just say the awakening. So let's talk about the title, because I think it was very, I mean, well, both titles, Growing Pains and The Awakening, are so correct, so right for the books, for the projects. So The Awakening, where did that title come from?
You know, it just came to me. So as I was getting close to the 20-day mark, the last poems, I was like, what am I gonna call this? And I didn't just want it to be like poetry book or something, super
Right,
plain, like, oh yeah, it's
right,
my
yeah,
second book or whatever. So I was like, I thought about it. And when I was writing this book, it was during Pluto retrograde. So basically, when Pluto goes into retrograde, Pluto represents transformation. And I was like, okay, during that time, I was reevaluating a lot of things that had gone on in my life, and I thought of the butterfly. So I was like, you know what? I really should call the book something that has something to do with like a transformation and waking up and just opening my eyes to what is really going on around me. And so that's when I was like, the awakening. So I was gonna call it the Great Awakening, but I was like, no, that's too much. I was like, the awakening just sounds so good.
it
It
does.
sounds so straight to the point. And
Right.
then it's like when I said it to myself, I was like, I want to learn more about that. So I was like,
Mhm. Mhm.
this is what other people are probably going to say, like the awakening. Ooh, that sounds real good. Like, what is the awakening about?
Right. Right.
It's kind of
Exactly.
mysterious, so you want to know
Yeah.
more.
Right.
So yeah, that's where
Exactly.
it came from.
Cool. And off air again, we were talking about. Well, not again because I didn't mention this before, but we were talking about how you made everybody aware that the book was available and the reason why. So it was essentially, if you follow, well, this is how I found out. So if you follow Alyssa on Facebook, there was literally a post one day that said something to the effect of, get ready because something is coming. And then, the next post was, I have this book available now. I'm want to, announce that this is available. And so you were just talking about the universe and what Pluto represents and all of that, and you were kidding mostly, I think, or some, when you said that you didn't want to put that vibe into the air, like I'm going to be releasing this book, and then something was to happen where it may not have been able to be released for whatever the reason. So when you announced that the book was available and not letting anyone really know that you were working on this project, what was the response from people, from your fans, or from people that that weren't aware that the book was coming out?
So I had been really quiet for a while um, on my poetry page, and I hadn't posted much poetry. And so one person reached out to me. He was like, "Hey, what's going on? I haven't seen you post in a while. Is everything okay?"
Right.
So I was like, everything is okay. I have a few projects going on. Look out for it. I'll, keep you posted. Stay tuned. And then that exact day, I was like, you know what? Maybe there are other people who are wondering, but
Mhm.
just aren't sure if they should ask. So I just
Mhm.
put a post up. I was like, you know what? Stay tuned. More things are coming, but I wasn't comfortable with revealing exactly what I was working on because
Mhm.
I did not want any outside energies to
Mhm.
influence or throw off
Mhm.
what I was working on at the time because it wasn't completed yet.
Mhm.
So, I had just was like, stay tuned. Growing Pains is not the only book that I'm working on
Yeah.
because that was just the first book of whoever knows how many books I could be writing. So I was just like, let me just finish what I'm doing. And I get anxious when I feel like I have something really, really, really good going on. I've gotten to the point where I've shared it with the wrong people. And
Mhm.
then I've
Mhm.
gotten this bad vibe because of it wasn't something that I did wrong. It was just people wished that they had the talent that I had, and this is just past experiences. So I came in with this new situation with that knowledge and with that lesson, and I was like, you know what? Even though I would love to tell everybody that I'm working on the second book, I'm like, no, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to keep all of this energy and put it toward my project because that's how I am. I'm an Aries, so I'm very passionate. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't wait. And I'm like, no, I'm using that passion that I have and I'm going to put it into this project. And I'm going to make sure that it's completed. I'm going to make sure I say what I have to say, get straight to the point. And there had been a couple other people who had asked me, like, am I gonna do anything else? And I was like, there are things in the works. I didn't say anything. So there were a few people who were like faithful fans, like who have been supporting me. Um, and I all I said was, I have something in the works. They kind of knew I was working on something,
Yeah.
but I was like, you know what, I can't tell you when it's gonna happen because I don't like to say one thing and then something else
Mhm.
happen.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's the part of me where I've learned how to be more disciplined and not announcing anything until I know it's final. So yeah, that took a lot of self-discipline for
And I was
me.
about to ask you about that. Yeah, I mean, because you mentioned anxiousness, right? And you
Mhm.
having this wanting and this, I don't know if I'll call it a need, but this active desire to announce it, to get it out, to let people know. So, yeah, how difficult was it for you to keep quiet?
It was a lesson I had taught myself because I had stopped sharing poetry. I stopped sharing things that weren't published because it was like I was giving my talent out for free.
Mm.
Like, I love to write, don't get me wrong, and I love to just share whatever's on my mind, even if it's just like a short poem. But it came to the point where I was like, you know what? Yes, this is my talent, this is my gift, and I love to share it with people, as I've said already. But at the same time, I'm also running a business.
Mm.
So it's like, yes, I'll share things here and there, but not to the point where I spoil my surprise. So it's like sometimes you have to keep that mystery about you when you're an author or a poet or um, someone who's running a business, because you don't want to give away too much information, because then your message will not hit the way it's supposed to hit. So
Mm.
I've learned even before publishing this book how to reserve that excitement and to just use that excitement and put it into my projects. And it's helped me because it was like, okay, well, I already know not to say this or that or post this or that or give away too much of my poetry. So it was like I already had practiced that discipline. So when it came down to the book, I was like, oh, this is a piece of cake. Let me just talk
Right.
about
Yeah.
my old poems, in which I
Right.
kind of did. I
Right.
posted up some
Right.
old
Right.
poems.
Right.
And I was like, you know what? I kind of don't want to post up about these old poems anymore. So let me just say I got something coming. And then that will like shift the energy like, oh, really? Like,
Right.
what do you
Yeah.
got
Okay.
coming?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like how you did that. Okay.
Mhm.
And so, and but what's great about that, like when you have that discipline, because to have discipline, it insinuates that there is work involved to do that, right? That it's just not something that happens, right? There's intent there, and the satisfaction that you personally feel when you are able to transfer that excitement that you would normally use to share what's going on and put that energy into the project itself, and at the end of that period to be able to say, yes, I did hold out even though I wanted to share. I did hold out. There's a level of satisfaction there that can and should help motivate people to, or a person to, continue to, like, hey, I was able to hold out. I was able to be disciplined, and this is the example that I can fall back on to show that I am able to do this if I want to do this. So I thought that was cool for
Thank
you,
you.
yeah, for you to do. And then I just lost my train of thought. I was going to ask you something else. Um, well, I'm sure it'll come back to me. So I'll go back to that if I think about it. So more about the book. So just know that I was caught up right away. Like even with the title of the first piece uh, in the book, Miseducation of the Introvert. I love that title for a number of reasons. One of my favorite books is The Miseducation of the Negro. And again, I mentioned earlier that I'm an introvert. And so the title caught me right away. And then when I read the piece, I thought it was perfect. One of the so there were two parts. The whole poem was great, but my favorite parts was how it started and how it ended. And if you don't mind, I just want to read what I loved about the two parts that I loved. So it starts off by, and forgive me if I butcher it, but I remember they thought that the absence of my voice meant that I didn't have one, when in reality, silence became the coping mechanism for every traumatic experience that my subconscious recorded. And then the last part, I remember when they thought that the absence of my voice meant that I didn't have one, until the power of my truth broke every misconception. Brilliant. I love that.
Thank you.
I love that. So where did that come from?
So it came from me understanding that a lot of the time, as an introvert, because this came from like my last book, I talked about being introverted, but it was just a cycle of me just running into people basically looking at me like I was. wrong for wanting to remain silent in certain situations. And yes, of course, you're supposed to speak up. Other times, I use my introversion as a strength because a lot of people don't know how to control themselves verbally.
Man.
And sometimes there's no filter. With me, I had learned that people wanted me to speak up. And certain things, I was like, no, I don't feel comfortable sharing my feelings or emotions with you. Because for one, I felt like they wouldn't understand me. For two, they would look at me like what I felt was completely wrong. And so I felt safer keeping those feelings to myself because growing up, that's how I felt. I felt like I didn't have a safe place to really express myself verbally based off of what I felt emotionally. And so I was basically told, what do they say? Children are supposed to be seen and not heard.
Heard. Right.
So I was, I always was so quiet because I felt like I couldn't speak up. And so I kept this mentality growing up, even into adulthood, that I had to be quiet because if I didn't, then I would cause problems because I'm speaking up and speaking my truth. And then I began to feel the same way about adults because when I did speak up, when I reached that point where I did share what I felt, a lot of people still didn't like what I had to say. And I was like, okay, well, you told me that I'm too quiet. You told me that I need to speak more. And this is not me trying to please you. This is me being vocal about who I am authentically. And you still have a problem with me?
Right.
So I began to notice all of these patterns within myself. Like I kept quiet because it was just how I coped with what was going on around me growing up. And then it was like I was being brought into these other patterns of being around people who wanted me to speak up, but be quiet and only speak up about what they accepted me to speak about. And I was
Exactly.
like, it was just the same pattern just going on and on and on. I'm like, listen, I don't care what you like about what I say, which whether you like how I'm quiet, this is how I operate, and I've become comfortable with being silent when I need to be silent. But then I've also become comfortable with balancing that energy and speaking up when I know I need to speak up. So it was like, listen, you really thought that I had no voice because I
Mm.
just chose to be
Mm.
reserved. And to be
Mm.
honest, that's a superpower
It
because I
is.
have all of these things that, I've been able to observe and listen. And when you're not
Yes.
speaking, you're spending that time listening,
Oh
and
man.
it's a lot of things that people don't do.
Yes.
And so with that, I've also learned that when I've learned how to speak up more, I'm like, okay, I think I'm talking too much. Let me calm down so I know
Right.
how to
Right.
listen.
Right. Right. Right.
So it was like, you know what? I don't care what you think about me anymore. You've been miseducated about what an introvert is. You make
Man.
fun of people who don't speak up, and yet, I could go on for days, but it was just like, listen, this is who I am. You take it or leave it, and that's that.
Yo, man. Superpower is the was the word that I was going to use after you spoke. 'Cause that's exactly what it is, right? Like, the saying goes when it comes to quiet people that you need to watch out for the quiet people, for the quiet ones. But I think, like, for me, it doesn't go far enough because, usually when they say that, it's whether they're joking or not, it's usually for something outrageous, right? Like, oh, they have a bad temper, or, they are this way, or they are that way. But what you said was spot on, that a lot of us listen and we watch, we observe, we take in, we think about it, and then we react, right? And I think that because most people don't do that, or they don't have the patience to do that, or because they don't know how to do that, it is a superpower. It's something that a lot of people aren't able to understand. and they're not able to, yeah, they're not able to do it. So yeah, you
Right.
do need to watch out for the quiet ones, cause yeah. So I love that. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. My favorite piece. I mean, they all were great, but my favorite piece in the book is "Perfect Enough," just because it resonated with me on so many levels, and personally, because like I have acknowledged a long time ago that I have some like I well not like, but I do have some abandonment issues that I had to work through when it came to the decision to, let's say, be in a committed relationship. Like it will be something that I was hesitant to do because I felt like my imperfections were going to prohibit me from having a long term successful relationship. And that was because I was too focused on my imperfections and I didn't accept and embrace them. Um, and then it allowed me to minimize my value. Dating was okay for me. Like I'm a great dater. Like going out and having fun and getting to know someone on a superficial or even on a somewhat deeper level, but not quite as deep as I can go. But what it ultimately resulted in from from time to time, and you mentioned this, it would leave me looking to establish a trauma bond, and I don't know if this is what you were going for when you wrote that piece, but like for me, I realized that, or the piece helped me remember that, or even realize that with that trauma bond, I was focusing on their trauma in order to, again, to relate, but it prevented me from embracing or accepting the great qualities about that person if they had any, right? And so, like I said, this piece really struck with me on a wide variety of levels. Can you talk about that piece, or will you talk about that piece and why you, or what the mindset was when you wrote it?
Absolutely. So the day that I wrote that, I was just thinking about me loving myself and being good enough for myself. I was at the point where I finally had learned how to just accept me for who I was, the emotions and the experiences that I went through and had felt. And then I was like, all this time, I felt like I was never good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then the whole time I was more than enough. I was just going through a lot and I used other people to try to heal myself. And it was like we were using each other basically to
Mm-hmm.
heal each other. And the whoever I was dealing with in the past kind of mirrored who I was at that time. So it was like we were both entangled into this trauma bond and kind of using each other to heal each other when really we should have been healing ourselves the entire time. So I realized this pattern like, yeah, I was hurt. I had a lot of issues. I was still good enough no matter what I was going through.
Right.
But it was like I wasted so much of my time trying to heal and help everyone else. And in the process, because of this, because the other person was not complete within themselves, I felt like I was just not enough for them because they weren't even enough for themselves.
Right.
So it was like
Right.
we both weren't enough for who we were, so we kind of used each other. And I was like, you know what? With this knowledge, I'm now understanding that I just use all of these broken pieces to fill my broken pieces, and it was just
Mm-hmm.
a complete mess. When all I could have done was just focus on myself and heal myself because I alone am enough. I am perfect. So, yeah.
Why I say that it resonated with me on so many different levels because, well, is because I do understand that none of us are perfect, right? So we all are imperfect and we all have our imperfections, but it is about accepting and embracing our imperfections, recognizing that even with those imperfections, we are perfectly imperfect. And rather than, at least for me, what I gathered from it or what I took from it was even with those imperfections, we still need to recognize the great things about ourselves. Because for me, when it, and unfortunately, and maybe it just wasn't the right time, but because of my abandonment issues or other insecurities that I had at the particular point in time, I'm lost a lot of great potential partners because I was so focused on my imperfections and not accepting them that I felt like, well, I was only able to focus on their what I thought were perfections,
Mhm.
right? And because of that, I felt inadequate in some ways from a mental and an emotional standpoint. There was inadequate or something. I didn't feel adequate. And I felt like, okay, well, once they really get to know me, or once we're in a significant other type of relationship, they're going to realize that I have these imperfections, and they're not going to want me anymore at some point. It when you talked about or when you mentioned not feeling as though you were enough. I think that was the most important part of that piece is to recognize that it is up to us to accept right who we are, our
Mhm.
imperfections, embrace them, and really take time out to value ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Another piece that I loved uh, that stood out to me. I promise I won't go through all 20. Uh, but was forgiveness, right? That the piece called forgiveness. And I say that because when I was reading that piece, there was a part that stood out to me. It goes, forgiveness is not granting the right of an injustice, nor does it mean allowing it to happen again, but you owe it to yourself not to give others the freedom to rent space in your head. Now, that's part of it. But yeah, and I thought that was so profound because, a lot of people feel like, well, a lot of people don't realize that there are different ways to forgive and different reasons to forgive. And I think a lot of people feel like forgiveness is intended to be beneficial and fulfilling to the forgiven. But forgiveness is more than that, or it can be more than that. It can be self-serving. And so, talk about your piece, forgiveness, and what the message of that piece was.
So, this had come from me realizing that holding grudges did me no good because it, to be honest, it was only like so toxic. Like, what are you holding a grudge for? Like, of course, it's um it's only right that we all have these standards and boundaries as to how we all should be treated. And if someone crosses those boundaries, they should be told. And that's only right. That's how you're supposed to go about your life. Because that's showing other people that you have respect and love for yourself. However, it's like when we continue to like hold these grudges toward people, like, oh my gosh, I hate this person, or I'm never going to talk to this person again, or you just, yes, you can acknowledge those feelings that you have, because those are natural feelings. You're going to have negative feelings, but to continue to hold on to these negative feelings is like poison. And to me, I had gone through so much growth that I had to let all of these poisonous feelings go because it stunted my growth by holding on to them, whether it be with friends, whether it be with family members, coworkers. I felt like it was really not sitting well with me to just look at people all side-eyed because of how they treated me, what they said to me. Like, keep those people from a distance. If
Right.
you have to cut those bonds, cut those bonds, but like cut them and just let it go and move on. Like, don't continue to constantly ponder on what they said, how they said it, what they did to you, because how are you supposed to grow and move forward into your next stage of life if you're continuously moving backwards and remembering, oh, she said this to me, oh, he said that to me. You can't, because you're so constantly focused on what someone did to you or didn't do to you. And
Right.
it's like you're poisoning yourself. So to me, even if someone really hurt me bad and I wanted to make it known to them that they hurt me, and or in the back of my mind I would be like, you know what, this person should not be forgiven, they don't deserve happiness. To be honest, that wasn't the vibration that I should have been aligned with, because how are you going to say you're growing and yet you're still wishing this negative energy on somebody? Like, by all means, have your feelings, get through them, but it's like I realize I really need to free myself from holding all of this negativity because it was weighing me down. I felt like I could not bring a message to anybody if I couldn't bring that message to myself first. So it was like I freed myself of that weight. I learned, and it didn't happen overnight. It took a very long time, and it's a process to be able to forgive someone and release those emotions, because it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of work on yourself to let go of something that hurt you so much. And then I had to realize that this person was, or these people were at a certain point of life where they weren't very conscious of where they were themselves. And even for myself, I've had to forgive myself for things that I've done, that I've said, that at the moment I wasn't very conscious of my actions. So as soon as I forgave myself for things that happened, I accepted it, even though I didn't want to accept it. I understood the situation for what it was, and I moved on. And ever since I've learned that lesson of forgiveness, I've been so much lighter. Like, I've just been able to open up my heart to what is meant for me, and that just makes things flow so much better.
The question that I was going to ask that I lost my train of thought on was earlier. You mentioned when you talked about sharing your work. Part of what you do is a business, and so I just want to know: was it difficult for you to transition from a mindset perspective, where at one point, and I don't know how much you did it, but from at one point sharing your work freely, because either you wanted to get it out for people so you can share it, or because you recognize that it may help someone. to, hey, okay, well, now, it's this is a business as well. So I can't share as much, or I can't do as much as I would normally do, because there's this extra aspect to it.
So I would say at first it was a bit of a challenge because I had grown to when it's like when we're so accustomed to sharing everything on social media, we tend to overshare. So I this goes back to like self-discipline part where I used to like post poetry, like whatever would be on my mind, I would just post it. I wouldn't even keep it for myself for like my own personal reasons. I would just be like, okay, I have this nice little poem I'm gonna share. Let me see who likes it. And it would just be
Yeah.
like, let me see who likes it instead of
Mm,
it was not very purposeful. It was more of very impulsive.
mm,
So and one of my qualities as an Aries is sometimes I can be impulsive. So I was like, you know what? When I began to take my poetry more seriously and I turned it into like, I want to write books, it was like, how can I write a book if I'm constantly, or at least when I'm getting these ideas, I'm sharing these ideas? I can't get a book because they already see it. It's not going to
right.
be a surprise. So I'm going to have to learn how to separate certain things. Like it's okay to post things here and there, like tiny little phrases, like little rhymes that I will come up, like inspirational rhymes, because I do that. I like post up like little inspirational things, but they're like poetry. But they'll be like really small and to the point, and I'm like, okay, it's okay that that wasn't like a whole paged poem where I'm giving all my prized knowledge to. So I'm like, okay.
Right.
So I became a little bit more wise with what I posted and more intentional with what I posted. And whatever it is that I had some juicy message that I wanted to share, I didn't share it. I was like, you know what? I would start to type it and I was like, you know what? What I did was I would copy it, I would paste it and put it into a Google document, and then I would build off of that. And so I was like, I am so glad that I did not share that because
Mm,
like days later, weeks later, months later, I actually added to it and it became a poem, like a solid poem, and then I saved it. And so I was like, this is not just sharing, it's like this is my business. Like, and I have to treat it as such because it became valuable. It was like my child. Like it was my third child and I'm like sitting
right.
here
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
when you value something so much, you like you can't always share everything about it. Like you got to keep certain things to yourself. And that's when I learned how to be more self-disciplined with my writing and actually treat it like a business because this is my business as well as it's my gift. So that's how it all started.
Was it uncomfortable? Because I do know that there are a lot of people who, for whatever the reason, have this feeling of uncomfortableness to charge for their services, or to, so I guess in your particular instance, to put this book together or put that book together and then charge for the book, charge someone to read what we created, versus before, like we talked about, you freely sharing it. Was there a mindset change there too? Was there a feeling of worth that you may not have had before, that you had to add on to who you were in order to feel comfortable charging for your work?
Absolutely. I feel like I was selling myself short because I'm a very down to earth person. So basically, when I'm very transparent, it's like I'm real. I'm very honest about what I say, what I feel, and the experiences that I share. So it was like I'm really saying a lot that a lot of people would not be as open as I am about. So if you really think about it, like me being an author was like me being a teacher. Like I just have been able to use my words in a way where I teach with my poetry from based off of what I've gone through myself. So it was like, do teachers get paid for free? Like as much as they love their jobs,
Right.
well,
Right.
most of them, and as
Right.
much as they love how rewarding it can be, at the end of the day, like that is they do what they're passionate about, and I don't expect anything less from anyone who does what they're passionate about, but at the same time, like when you have such a great talent and a great gift, you should be rewarded for the same value. Like you're sharing something so valuable with people who you really don't have to share.
Right.
Like sensitive topics you open up about, and you're sharing this divine wisdom, and you're sharing these conscious lessons with people, and it's like I can't just share all of this for free. Like I'll
Right.
share bits and pieces of it for free because that's just who I am as a person. But to be honest with you, if I'm like shooting out poems like crazy and I'm putting like these divine messages in that I get from my higher source, like that is so valuable. Like, and I would do it for free, but at the same time, if this is what I want to make a living off of, this is what I want to do for my life, like
Mm-hmm.
just as a person, like we all have to come together and support one another in a business aspect, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I felt like. I was like, you know what? I need to really think more about how much I want to sell this for because I know people can't afford certain things and I know how that is. So it's like, I'm going to set it at an affordable price where I know people can get it. I even had a time where I had a raffle where people were getting free books from me because I know sometimes people could use that little $20 for some gas in their
Right.
car. Like,
Right.
I
Yeah.
get it. I'm a single mother, so I understand. So it's like I had to be humble, but at the same time, I had to be realistic because I love to help people. However, how can I fulfill my dream of wanting to be a self-published author for the rest of my life if I just do this for free? Like I won't be able to
Right.
travel across the world and give these messages out if I'm always gonna do it for free, you know?
I do. I do.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know. Like I said, I know there are some creatives who have trouble doing that, and so it's good to hear your perspective and your process on how you make that transition and the mindset that goes into that. So I know that you are going to share some of your work today, but before we get into that, one thing that I do want to acknowledge is that you do something that I think is very cool. At least on your Instagram page, you do work to support other creatives, poets specifically, by promoting them and their projects. If it's a book that you like, you're not a stranger to sharing that information with people. I believe that one of those books was Crashing, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I love that book.
Listen, 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 Jerusalem. Yeah. Talk about why that's important. Why do you feel that's important to do? And I'm not sure if you do that because you feel like you have a responsibility to do it, or if it's simply because you want to get the word out about the books. But can you talk a little bit about, or a lot of bit, depending on what you have to say, about why you do that and why you think it's important?
Absolutely. So, as a poet, as an author, as a writer, spoken word artist, I feel like it is my duty to support others who are like on the same life path, same life mission. I feel like it would be so selfish of me if I would just promote my poetry, my business, and just only connect with people who I feel like are good enough. I like to network. I've become more comfortable coming out of my shell and you're like, okay, well, you write. Okay, do you have a book out? And I know that it's important for us to support one another because I have seen situations where certain writers or creatives will only support certain people. Like they won't go outside of their little niche. And I feel like, how can we say we support one another or support black owned businesses if we really aren't true to that statement? Even if they're not black owned businesses, how are we supposed to live by these words that we support one another when we really don't? And I feel like I should stand true to that because if I want someone to support my work, then shouldn't I do the same to someone else? I feel like
Mm.
it's only right because you have to have that equal exchange of energy. And I feel like it doesn't take anything away from me by promoting someone else's work, to be honest, because I'm helping someone else. I'm not doing it to really help them. I'm just like, hey, listen, this is a good person. Like, I read their book. They're super awesome. Like, I don't have to blow anything out of proportion. I'm just like, hey, here you go. Here's a book for you because I feel like it's the right thing to do. Like, we're supposed to be here to support one another. So yeah, that's really big for me.
Yeah, and thank you for doing that because I think, like you, it's very important to support others when you're able to, especially when you. And it's not necessarily supporting specific people all of the time, but especially when you like the work, you love the work that someone put out, and you want to recommend something specific to people. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I appreciate you having that mindset and you doing what you do when it comes to that because whether it's intentional or not, a lot of people don't do that. And so,
Right.
yeah, so okay. So, yes, you have indicated that you're going to share some of your work. So, I will, as I did the last time that you were here, I will step away and step off of this virtual platform and allow you to do your thing.
Cool. So I'll just randomly pick whatever spirit guides me to pick. I'm not even gonna be like, oh, let me pick this one
Oh
because I
yeah,
like
yeah,
it.
yeah.
So yeah, I'll just start with one. Okay. Let me just flip real quick. Okay. So I'm gonna read Memories. What is a memory but a reminder of how we can time travel through nostalgia to a place that will never die, through touch and smell, sight and sound? We feel everything as if nothing exists outside of that moment. A thousand memories framed through faces, bringing us back to familiar places. When lives pass, memories are all we have to bring them back. So take the pictures and make the plans because you never know how much time you'll have left in your hands.
Yes. Yep. When I read that, I was going to include that in my list of things to talk about or poems to talk about, but I had already wrote down like two or three, and I was like, well, I don't want to overwhelm or give it all away, so I
Mhm.
didn't include that one. So just in case you, uh, the next poem that you share is one of them. I won't mention the others that I wrote down, but so yeah, I like that piece. What was the, if you can remember, what was the, speaking of memories, what was the motivation behind that specific piece?
I would say me having the experience of losing someone due to like a death,
Mm-hmm.
and then me finding someone, found my father at the age of 30. Um, Me realizing that, you know, tomorrow is not always promised.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that based off of that, I have been, building memories not only with just my father, but with other people that it's very important to be in the moment, to live in the moment. We get so caught up in the future, we get so
Right.
caught up in the past that sometimes we're not focused on the now, enjoying our time, enjoying the
Mm-hmm.
breath that our breath that we breathe in and out, and the nature that we have around us because we're focused on the wrong things. Um, so I feel like we really should focus on building moments with people that we do care about because we really don't know how much time we have left with each other. Not to say like to be scared or anything,
Right.
but just to value each other a little bit more than we already do, you know?
I do. And I think a lot of times, to your point, that we do focus more on the destination than the journey. So we don't focus on the now. And also, to your point of not knowing how much time we have left, I seem to only meet up with or talk to or communicate with certain family members unless there's a funeral, right? And we always say, it never fails, like, oh, it's been so long. We need to exchange numbers and we need
Right.
to do better because the only time that we see each other and the only time that we talk is at funerals. So I promise to do better. And then we leave, and then the number gets lost in the shuffle in our phone somewhere. And, so it is like almost like a cycle.
Right.
Okay, so I will let you share your next piece.
Okay. So this one is Wanderlust. I yearn for a place where I can call home. Feelings of familiar, as if I belong, lead me there through the cosmos, in an alternate dimension, where time doesn't exist and our souls become intrepid. With silver cords keeping us connected, life is full of illusions, and our realities are created from our perceptions. Judgments and thoughts are merely projections, and every connection we form mirrors our true reflection. Find me finding myself in a space that is infinite, with the freedom to embody a spirit that is adventurous.
How long does it take for you typically? And I know you don't time every poem that you write as far as like how long it takes you to write it, but because your poems have this tendency to have so much substance in it and they aren't terribly long, how long typically does it take for you to write a poem or for you to say, okay, it's done?
For this specific book, because I had to submit one poem every single day, so before the day was out, I would have to email the poem to the publishing company. And so that challenged me to get my point across because sometimes I have had a habit of like, even when I speak, sometimes I would ramble. So, like, because I like to share every single little detail about
Yeah.
what it is that happened or what I feel, because I like to just bring the plot that way, right? As like a storyteller. But then I'm like, listen, if I'm doing this challenge, I can't do that. So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, so I have a coach. She's my mentor. Not really writing mentor, but she's like my spiritual mentor. So she did give me this advice that I should get straight to the point, make sure that I put depth in it as I always do with all my work, but basically say what I have to say, but make it, catching. So, I did express earlier on that I devoted about an hour to 2 hours to writing. Now, if I knew that, say, I put the kids to bed a little bit late that night, I would still devote some time, but I knew that I wouldn't be able to spend too much time editing whatever it is that I wanted to send. So, it would take me an hour, the least, an hour and a half to 2 hours the most to be like, it's
Mhm.
finished. So I came to a point where, okay, there's nothing else that I feel like I should add. I got out what I needed to get out for that day. It was like a journal entry for me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I basically used those 20 poems a day as like journal entries, but poetic journal entries. Um, so it was like, okay, I'm done. I said what I had to say, and that feeling of completion was there because I
Mm.
had nothing else to add. It was like my little dear diary in a sense, but intentional like writing for me. So that was just for this book, but Growing Pains was completely different. Growing Pains was I was all over the place because I had so many emotions that came from different places, and it was more of I learned how to um, organize all of those thoughts and feelings. With this one, I had to learn how to be organized at the beginning.
Man,
So
yeah.
yeah, it was completely opposite.
Now, do you think that you will take what you learned from writing this book, or more specifically, writing the pieces that you wrote for the book? Will you take that process and use that moving forward, or will it be a combination of what your method typically is versus the new way of doing things, or at least for this book, and find a balance?
Absolutely. I would say a little bit of both. I feel like if you're gonna do like a chat book and you want it to be just, simple and to the point, keep the reader wanting more, like, oh my gosh, what's next? Like, oh my gosh, this poem's too short. Oh, what's she
Right,
write
right,
next?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
definitely good because you have your reader wanting to know what's next. Like, they're anticipating, like, when is your next book? You were so good with it. Like,
Right,
I think
right.
that is a gift to be able to get straight to the point. But have depth in it to the point where your reader is curious. Like they want more of what you have. So that's good in an aspect, but in another aspect, I feel like if you're gonna like write a novel or something like long, I feel like you should take your time and make sure that you have to say all your words are in there and that you get your point across, that you tell your story the way you want to tell your story. So it's like learning the balance between them both and when it's appropriate to put an element in or take an element out.
And I was laughing during what you were saying because I am one of those ramblers. Like, I can go and, like, it's difficult for me sometimes to just get to the point. I don't know what it is. I'm not sure if I like to hear myself talk or what it is, but like it's just. So when you started to say that, I was like, oh well, I guess I won't be doing that. Uh, so all right, cool. All right, well, thank you for sharing your work as always. I loved it. I love the pieces, and the couple other pieces that I had written down were trust and beauty, by the way. So um,
Awesome.
yeah, that I liked. Okay, so I just have three more questions for you, and then can let you let me go. So the first question to you is, if you could describe yourself in 5 words, and it can be on any level, what words would you use?
Humble,
Hmm.
trusting,
Hmm.
loyal,
Hmm.
intuitive, creative.
I think that's the first time since I started to ask that question that someone was able to just give me 5 right away. Like, after 3, then there's this pause, and then after 4, it's like, oh, what else? Okay, all right, that's cool.
Hmm.
All right. And then my next question is, where can people find you?
So my business page on Facebook is Alyssa Speaks. I have YouTube. I do upload whatever videos that I have at the time on YouTube. That's also Alyssa Speaks. My personal page is Poetress Alyssa Michelle. That's on Facebook. My Instagram is also Alyssa Speaks. And I do have TikTok. I mean, I post some stuff up there sometimes with me and my kids. If I'm like advertising a book, I'm also posting on there. That is Poetress Alyssa on TikTok. And I think that's about it. Trying to make sure I got all my social media accounts.
All right, cool. Oh, and then one more thing I do want to talk to you about, or at least tell you, is that the last time that you were here, you were talking about your first time performing and some advice that you got from a friend of yours, and it was essentially to be someone different, have an alter ego. Well, at least for you, you mentioned you were to be more outgoing and more confident. Well, when I ask creatives sometimes about their first time performing and how it was for them, and then they tell me, I mentioned to them what you told me, the method that you went through or the method that you used to help you. And what was interesting is that seems to be something, whether they knew it or not, that is what they did.
Hmm.
That same process where they stepped out of themselves and became someone else, either through changing their name and and then immersing themselves in that persona that they created. And so I thought that was funny when I would ask, and then I would get that type of response that people were doing the same things that you did. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, in order to be able to have the courage, I suppose, if you want to call it that,
Hmm.
to perform. So,
Awesome.
yeah, it was actually it was funny. Actually, it made me laugh. And then finally, of course, I love having you here, and I love the conversations that we have. And so, like I asked before, like, would you at some point, if invited or if you want, to come back on and talk to us again, talk to us some more?
Absolutely. I love sharing knowledge. I love conversing and seeing what other people think. And, just exchanging experiences and energies based off of art. That's always great.
Great, great. Yes, I love absolutely, as I told you before. So definitely we'll have you back. Whether you have a project or not. So if at any point in time you want to come back on and just talk art, if you want to talk about creativity, the door is always open. So
Thank you. I appreciate it.
yeah, you're very welcome. Alyssa, thank you so much for coming back, being here, sharing your wisdom, your knowledge. Congratulations on all of your success again. I love your work. I am a fan of yours and of you and how you approach life and how you motivate and inspire, because I know just by following you that you do that for a lot of people. So continue to do what you do, and whatever we can do here to help support whatever it is that you have going on, just let us know.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your support.
Yep, you're very welcome. We'll talk soon.
All right.